Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization, doing great stuff all around the state. This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. I will fix it, Michael, I promise. We are live at the Mackinac Policy Conference, hosted by, of course, the Detroit Regional Chamber. And joining me right now is this year's conference chair, Patti Poppe, who also happens to be president and CEO of CMS Energy and Consumers Energy. Thank you very much for being here. You are the busiest person on the island officially this week.
It's my pleasure. I think there's one other woman who might be busier than me, and that might be our governor. She's got a busy schedule, too.
Well, she made some big news.
She sure did.
And you always want news to come out of the conference.
Yeah.
She signed, of course, a pretty historic deal on auto insurance out there. And I always like to look at legislation and suggest if somebody's ticked off about some part of it and everybody's a little bit ticked off about part of it, it's probably a pretty good bill.
Yeah. She, I think, and the leaders of the House and Senate demonstrated that in Michigan, we can actually be united even though we have divided government. And when the rest of the world is just getting further apart from one another, here in Michigan, we can come together, get the best ideas on the table. In fact, not in spite of our diversity, but because of it, come up with better solutions. And they demonstrated it today. Historic signing here on the porch.
Well, civility has been a big part of this conference for a long time, trying to figure out a way to mend some of these fractured relationships that have been out there. It seems like a pretty good start.
It's a great start. It really has left a feeling of optimism across the whole conference. People actually can see that as a reason to believe that bipartisan action is possible. We've got some tough issues to tackle next. Roads, education. We're going to have a lot of conversation about education here today at the conference. I can't wait for people to hear the lineup of what we're going to talk about today.
Well, this has been a subject that has been brought up at this conference for, the last 5 years, I believe? Education has been a key part of this, saying, how do we fix this? There seems to be a logjam here. What sort of progress are you seeing in terms of what people are talking about that gives you hope that maybe we are turning the corner on this?
Well, we have 3 objectives for this year's conference on education.
Yes.
Number 1, we want people to know there is a problem. I think it actually is one of the problems. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm so sorry about their district. My district's doing great. When in fact, when you look at the statewide statistics, we're 41st in 4th grade reading, 42nd in 4th grade math. That's a problem. 41st and 42nd out of 50. I think if you polled people would not know that. And so they need to understand that it's a statewide problem. Even our best districts are performing worse than other states' worst districts. So we've got some major catching up to do. So that's number 1.
Yeah.
People need to know. But number 2, there's a group that's come together called Launch Michigan. And this is what makes me hopeful. In this era of bipartisan required reform, we've got the Teachers Union. Paula Herbart of the MEA is one of the co-chairs. Tanya Allen from the philanthropic community, she's the chair of the CEO of the Skillman Foundation, and Doug Rothwell from Business Leaders for Michigan are the co-chairs of Launch Michigan. The Detroit Regional Chamber is a member. There's other educators who are members. This group is doing the tough, heavy lifting of establishing priorities, metrics, and policy recommendations, and they're staying at the table long enough to hash it out. That is very important. That can enable then a legislature to take action knowing they've got bipartisan support coming to them, bringing bipartisan solutions to them. That's important.
My guest once again is Patti Poppe, who is the chair of this year's conference. I wonder, is it a blessing or a curse? I mean, obviously it's an honor to do this kind of thing, but you have been busy, and there's all kinds of stuff that you are responsible for when you do this. You're about to hand this over to somebody else pretty soon, but what's the experience been like for you?
It's been fun. I'm a Michigander, and when my company, Consumers Energy, can be a force for good, that's a good day for me. And so to be able to convene all of the right people at a place like this, doing the work that will serve a lasting impact. In fact, I used a saying, an old proverb yesterday, that one generation plants the trees and the next enjoys the shade. My ambition for this conference this year is that we plant some trees, that we as business leaders, policymakers, philanthropic community, educators are here on this island to make a difference for the next generation. And that's very motivating to me. That's not hard. That's just a blessing.
Well, you hear about talking about the next generation, and a lot of people, wouldn't think of a utility company as necessarily caring about that. But you take a look at the steps that consumers is taking, that DTE Energy is taking in terms of backing off carbon emissions, trying to reduce this sort of stuff. The pace of that change is accelerated, I think, a lot faster than even you guys expected a few years ago. Talk about where CMS is and consumers is in terms of reducing your carbon footprint, getting off of coal, and converting to alternative means of generating electricity.
First and foremost, we believe climate change is happening, and as a result, we've taken actions.
Okay, how come the private sector can admit this, and frankly, the government is unwilling to in many cases?
I think my own personal experience.
Why is this political?
I don't know why it's political, but I think there was an era where people actually didn't have the right science to look at and compare, and so people drew conclusions. It takes a lot to actually do your homework and understand what is the current science, and we did a lot of homework on this, and it changed my mind. I used to have a bumper sticker on my car that said, "I heart coal." I learned how to generate electricity at 5 coal plants, but we've closed 7 of our 12 coal plants already at Consumers Energy. That reduced our carbon emissions by 38%. We've initiated the dates for the remaining closures. We're going to be a decade ahead of the Paris Climate Accord. We're going to be a decade ahead of the recommended science community. We're not waiting for policy or regulation or laws to tell us what to do. We can serve people, the planet, and Michigan's prosperity by committing to a cleaner energy future.
But again, the economics of this have been changing so quickly as well, though. I mean, that makes the decision a little bit easier if this technology is getting cheaper all the time.
Yeah,
natural gas is a lot cleaner than coal, obviously. That's Jerry Anderson from DTE was on earlier. He called that a gap fuel, frankly. He seems to think of natural gas as something that we're going to utilize until we have the renewables that we need. Do you agree? Is that something that we're going to see?
I think there's 2 things that are lost in that part of the conversation. One, our 20-year energy plan that we just signed a massive settlement with the Sierra Club and our largest business leaders shows we're actually only adding new renewable energy. We're going to add 6,000 megawatts of solar to replace our remaining coal plants. And that's because they're modular. You don't have to take a big bet on a big gas plant to be able to match supply and demand. But the other part of the equation that I think has been undercommunicated is the need to reduce our peak usage. Michigan's peak usage of electricity happens a couple hours a year when everybody's air conditioning is cranked up. Because we have moderate temperatures generally in Michigan, we have to oversize the entire system. In fact, double the size of the system for those couple hours a year. We have a strong belief that the cheapest and cleanest kilowatt is the one you never use. And so we are really spending a lot of time on programs called demand response and using AI and machine learning, smart communicating thermostats, and smart meters to enable a flatter load curve. It's a little wonky, and I'm sure your listeners are geeking out a little bit with me, but the reality is if we can shave that peak, we can reduce the size of the whole system, and then adding modular renewable energy matches perfectly with our Ludington pump storage facility right up here in northern Michigan.
Oh, utility companies over the years have incentivized people to upgrade appliances, for instance, but giving some sort of credits for energy efficient appliances. Smart thermostats like Nests and things like that are going to be a game changer in allowing you to do that.
Game changer.
Is that the kind of thing that you could incentivize, and would it make economic sense for you to do so?
We already do incentivize them, but we need to take it to the next level and work with customers to optimize their usage. It's so cool, the opportunity that with smart technologies that we can cool your house a little bit before the peak and your neighbors a little bit offset from you, and imagine 1.8 million data points that are optimized so you never have the peak, even though everyone's house is the perfect temperature. This was not possible before, and it is now. So when we start with that, then we have to build less stuff. Natural gas and coal become less and less relevant. We're going to go to zero coal. Our natural gas part of our portfolio is reducing, not growing, because modular renewables combined with Ludington pump storage and demand response is the cleanest, most efficient. We call it our clean and lean energy future for Michigan.
Well, last question for you, because I know you've got a busy schedule, but I do want to talk about some news that you guys made. Charging infrastructure for vehicles. We are moving towards autonomous and electric vehicles. making sure that we've got places to charge them is going to be a big deal. Talk a bit about that.
Well, about 61% of Michiganders have said they're interested in electric vehicle, but one of the reasons they don't follow through and buy one is because of range anxiety. So we need to make sure that's when people are afraid they can't get where they need to get. So when we need to make sure that we've got the right charging infrastructure in place. And so we announced yesterday, we had a big press event, lots of attention. GM and Ford were with us, the Michigan Public Service Commission. We agreed to put in rebates, much like those energy efficiency rebates, to help people get the charging infrastructure. So at a home, for example, a $400 to $500 rebate can actually pay for the charger itself. There might be additional expense in getting your wiring properly aligned with a licensed electrician, but the rebate will pay for the charger. And then people most likely will charge at home, but we're also incentivizing high-speed chargers on Michigan's road trip alleys. When I drove from Jackson up to Mackinac City, between Lansing and Mackinac City's 229 miles, no chargers. I drive an electric car. That causes me range anxiety.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're putting in and incentivizing people to put in DC fast chargers across the state in all the critical locations so that people can take any road trip they want, enjoy the beauty and splendor of pure Michigan, and do that in an emission-free vehicle, and then ultimately that emission-free vehicle fueled by emission-free power.
There you go. Well, and it's one of those kinds of things that sends a message about what Michigan's priorities are.
Amen.
All right,
we can do it.
Patty, I know you've got to go. Patti Poppe, we certainly appreciate your time. Congratulations on the conference. It's been a ton of news. There's still a lot to go.
There sure are.
And some heavy hitters still coming up. So
awesome.
We
Thanks so
it.
much.
Pleasure to talk to you. This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit.